Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Michael Lighty. He is a healthcare expert, one of the fiercest, most passionate advocates for Medicare for All, fellow with the Sanders Institute, and we've spoken several times about, let's just say, creative marketing that Democrats put out on the healthcare side of things. Obviously, Biden ran on a public option that pretty much fell by the wayside pretty quickly. But now there's kind of reports that there might be a deal to be had between President Manchin and Schumer on a couple things, $300 billion for climate, which is, I won't even get into that because that's a joke. But they're talking about lowering prescription drug prices as part of this deal, as well as about $200 billion of more subsidies for Obamacare. So let's start with the prescription drug. You know that Democrats have been running on this since basically the 2000s, maybe longer. Can you kind of separate fact or fiction of that's a big if they come to this deal, Manchin and Schumer, what exactly does this mean, lowering prescription drug prices?
Well, it means, Jordan, lowering prescription drug prices for people over 65 in Medicare and on a limited basis. That it would cap those individuals' out-of-pocket expenses at $2,000 per year, and would over the next really like 8 years include a set of drugs that would be limited in terms of price via negotiations with the manufacturers. Those drugs, there would be 10 in 2026, 15 in 27, 15 in 28, and 20 in 2029. So you're talking about a benefit that doesn't go into effect for 4 years. When it does go into effect, it will be limited to a set of drugs that are ranked by cost to Medicare. So they'll say, okay, here are all the drugs. Here's what they cost Medicare. Here are the top, cost drugs for us. We'll choose some of those to begin negotiations. But those drugs have to be beyond their patent at least 7 to 8 years after launch. And that means probably that those drugs that are not that old, when they do launch, will be higher priced. So it has that negative effect as well. But it doesn't apply to folks on private insurance. It obviously benefits people on private drug plans under Medicare, because those are the only drug plans you can get under Medicare, either the purchased ones under Part D or the drug plans that are included in Part C, Medicare Advantage. So there's obviously some assistance to the insurance companies as well. The overall savings is estimated to be about $300 billion. That is a drop in the bucket in the prescription drug market. And it just shows you how much excess revenue and profits exist in that market, because they can do this very limited program and still save hundreds of billions of dollars. But the truth is that it's probably the most limited version of anything that has really been on the table. It's a version of what the House passed, but a little bit more limited than that. And since it doesn't include people on private insurance, it obviously has a limited demographic effect. Finally, it doesn't include insulin, though they expect it to eventually, if there is a deal on prescription drugs, some version of limits on out-of-pocket costs for insulin would be included. However, those out-of-pocket limits are not expected to apply to the uninsured, who have the greatest problem affording insulin.
So let me take that one by one. And by the way, just as we're speaking, President Manchin, we know what we can't pass is basically the drug pricing on Medicare. We know that one. If there's any more we could do, I don't know. But I'm very, very cautious. He reiterates 50 cents out of every $1 raise must go to deficit reduction. So, yeah. Anyway, let's start with the $2,000 for out of pocket for seniors. I guess you could say that's better than whatever it is now. But I mean, most seniors are on a fixed income. $2,000, along with inflation and just our general economic price increases, that still sounds like a lot of money for most seniors.
It is. Now, it's also true that some seniors are on these Medicare Advantage plans, Part C plans, that limit those out-of-pocket costs further. So it does depend, right? And that maximum is certainly not going to affect most people. In the sense that they're probably not spending $2,000 a month on prescription drugs. But of course, many seniors, many folks on Medicare have very high prescription drug costs, and so they might very well reach that limit. Now, it's also true that the way this whole thing was structured is that they pay a certain amount. A certain amount is covered, and then they reach what's called the donut hole. They've been shrinking that amount that they have to fully pay out of pocket. I can't remember what the current amount is. It's not a huge amount more than 2,000. I was thinking it might even be 2,500. So I'm not sure that this is a huge difference for many people, depending on what plan they're on.
Right. And when we're talking about 15 drugs in 2026, then another 20, essentially, I don't know, I can't do math, but like 75 drugs over 5 years.
Yeah, it's 10 the first year and then 30, 40, 60.
Okay. So why is it that it would start in 2026? I mean, it's 2022. What is the reason? Government red tape or just, wink, wink, we want to soften the blow for big pharma? What is the reason that it has to be staggered like that?
There's no legitimate policy rationale to do it. You could certainly ramp this up much more quickly. Clearly, it's a sop to the industry to give them time to raise prices in the meantime and to prepare. Presumably, it gives CMS and Department of Health Services time to figure out which drugs are eligible and then complete the negotiations. Whether they really need 4 years to do that, I doubt. And it's not even clear how far along they'll get, in terms of ranking the drugs and beginning those negotiations, because you're going. I guess the 7 to 11 year window for drugs post-launch to be eligible. By the time you're at 2026, we've already spent 4 years, right? Trying to figure out when that launch period is, and the drug companies can raise prices in the meantime.
Right. And can you kind of talk about, you mentioned that this doesn't apply to insulin, which I want to get to Gavin Newsom and what he's saying he's going to do in California, but it doesn't apply to insulin. Do these 75 drugs, I doubt they've announced them, but your guess, are any of these drugs like the most common used drugs for like high blood pressure, maybe epilepsy, common things that well, I wouldn't say common, but the biggest sources of medical necessity? Are these drugs going to cover some of those big ticket, illnesses, or are a lot of these drugs kind of more the rare type?
Well, we don't know exactly because I haven't seen a ranking of the drugs cost to Medicare. Now, there are two ways to get on that high, rank on that list. One is, of course, to be a very expensive drug. Those tend to be the biologics, the specialty drugs, and there are limitations on which of those are going to be eligible as well. And there's also an approach to do generic substitutes, right? So it might be that the process of negotiation is really a process of substituting generics for brand name drugs. And of course, the other way to get on that list is for a lot of people on Medicare to be taking a drug. And these drugs are not generally low cost to begin with. So if tens of millions of Medicare recipients are taking a drug that could be common, like a blood pressure medicine or something, it's possible it gets on the list. But very likely, these are brand name drugs for which there's no generic in the market now, which lowers prices. And so, the chances of these being widely used perhaps are less, because generally those tend to be generic. So we won't know exactly until we see some more analysis of what are these high cost drugs. And of course, we won't ultimately know until they pick the drugs they're going to negotiate over.
Right. And just from a big picture item, I mean, this just seems to me like Democrats kind of like trying to check a box in marketing and, campaigning. Like, we finally did it. We lowered prescription drug prices. We're honoring our promises, while softening the blow as much as possible for their donors. I mean, it seems like the most wasteful, bureaucratic mess, rather than, I don't know, do it. If Gavin Newsom, and I'd like to ask you about this because it sounds too good to be true, but Gavin Newsom, who seems to be doing a lot of things now in maybe preparation for a presidential run, he's saying we're just going to manufacture insulin ourselves. If he could do it in California, why can't the federal government do that? Why can't the federal government? I mean, these are rhetorical questions. We know they can, but can you just talk about this? Seems like completely wasteful. Not to mention, there's reports that as part of this lowering drug prices, they're going to throw another $200 billion for Obamacare subsidies.
Yes. The short answer is yes. I mean, look, we know the federal government could use its existing authority to determine that the drug manufacturers are not meeting their responsibilities to provide affordable medication, and could take over the licensure and manufacturing of those drugs, called compulsory licensure. And California is planning on doing it, and it is, of course, exactly the right thing to do, because frankly, the way that the industry is structured, and to give credit a little bit to this bill, they do try to go after this process of always extending patents, right? This bill does put some limit on the ability of drug manufacturers to keep extending these patents so that they never run out and open the door for generics. So there is some limitation on that in this proposal as well. But the truth is, the way it's set up is they can almost in perpetuity keep brand name drugs in the market at high prices. And so the question is, why bother doing this at all? And I don't even think politically it's that significant. Really, if you think about it, you're going to run in 2022, hey, you're going to have lower drug prices if you're over 65 in 4 years. I mean, that's not a great thing to run on. I think you said it at the beginning with the reference to President Manchin. It's just something Manchin can accept, so they're going to do it. But we shouldn't totally blame him, because this is a version of what the House passed. Now, they were going to implement it sooner. There were probably going to be more drugs. But Speaker Pelosi, there was a very progressive proposal to include 200 drugs at one point in the House proposal last session. She limited that at that time. So this is a bicameral approach to limiting this reform. And clearly it reflects the power of the drug industry, which is huge, obviously, as we know. Now, in terms of these Obamacare subsidies, this is, of course, the whole problem. Is the only way for the present system of health insurance to expand coverage is through increased tax subsidies, because the market is unable to create health insurance plans that people can actually afford and use. And so the only way to make them affordable is to subsidize them through taxpayer payments. And keep in mind that high-income Medicare beneficiaries pay a huge chunk of the revenue through increased taxes for those subsidies. So Medicare recipients are kind of getting a bum deal in that regard as well. But also keep in mind that these subsidies only limit premiums. The whole focus of the rhetoric and the policy is, let's keep premiums low. And they do. I mean, without these subsidies, some people's premiums go from like $10 a month to $200 to $400 a month. So it's not insignificant. But the fact is, it's out-of-pocket expenses beyond premiums for office visits, for hospitals, for drug medications, for other medical devices, those things that we pay, co-pays and so forth, that we pay out of pocket, that are exploding and that really aren't as limited as premiums are. So the whole focus is, if you can afford a premium, you've got affordable healthcare. But the fact is, 30% of Americans have gone without care because they couldn't afford it, even under these existing subsidies. Those numbers have continually been at that level, regardless of the level of subsidies. So that tells you subsidies are not addressing the fundamental problem, and they're a boon to the insurance industry.
Right. And can you kind of touch on, the media, the politicians seem to have, all come together to say COVID is over. Anecdotally, I tried to help my friend get into Johns Hopkins University's long COVID program, and there's a year waiting list. That's how many patients they have suffering with long-term COVID. I think we're looking at potentially a serious disability crisis in America due to COVID. Everybody's different. Some people get it 4 times and have no issues, and some people get it 1 time and it really sticks with them. Can you kind of talk about, we not just the wonky part you're describing, the policy part, but just from a societal part, we have endless variants. Now we got the BA.5 variant, which is more contagious. We don't know quite yet as far as virulence. We haven't shared the patents. Biden could use his emergency authority, seize those patents for Moderna and Pfizer, which we helped fund, by the way, share the vaccine around the world. Long story short, people might be depending a lot more on drugs over the next few years for COVID or ailments that have been a domino effect from COVID. This doesn't seem to be enough when you have the potential of more and more people becoming disabled.
Well, it isn't enough. You're exactly right, Jordan. This is a crisis, as you say, really a crisis of inhumane proportions, and it's a moral crisis, an ethical crisis, as much as a policy crisis. That we are simply failing as a humane society to meet the needs of people and to stop the spread of this pandemic. And it's not a coincidence that many of these variants kind of percolate and develop in countries that have lower vaccine rates, precisely because they can't afford the high-priced vaccines that American taxpayers subsidized, but go, to the profits of Moderna and Pfizer and the other drug companies. So this inhumane crisis is directly created by the market approach to drug manufacturing and distribution. And of course, the only solution is public provision, public production, public distribution. And then if we were able to create conditions of higher vaccination rates, particularly internationally, these variants wouldn't incubate, right, in unvaccinated folks. So the truth is that the drug companies enjoy something that they don't deserve, which is they save lives, they improve people's lives, and so they get, in some ways, they get kind of a pass. Oh, well, they're doing so much good, but of course, the good is completely driven by their profits, and unless we reverse that. And let's face it, universal health care, if we had had Medicare for all, research estimates that 300,000 fewer people would have died, maybe more. Could be 400,000. And so it ultimately is the existence of an inhumane healthcare system that simply doesn't meet our needs, and that is instead driven by profits and dominated by markets, perpetrated by Democrats who believe in this privatized approach to healthcare, that has caused this public health crisis.
Absolutely. And to humanize it even further, this is just a clip from yesterday. I interviewed a single mother in Illinois and was hospitalized 2019 for mental health challenges, got on the right medication. Unfortunately, with inflation and all the other costs going up, she could afford the medication. The problem is she can't afford the doctor that she needs to prescribe them. You got to go to the doctor for certain medications 2-3 times a year. I just want to play this clip and get your response.
I also need dental work done. I also lost my insurance when I turned 27, which was last February. And so even though I can afford the medication, I can't afford the doctor's visits to get the refills. So now, on top of everything that I'm dealing with just the financial uncertainty and whether I'm going to have a car soon, I am unable to really pay for my mental health meds. And I have started to ration them recently, where I'm now taking them like every other day, just to, because if I I could try and self-wean, but this is a type of medication that if you wean off of it, the withdrawal symptoms are just unbearable. So I'm basically just taking enough to like stave off the withdrawal symptoms. I have no idea, I feel like I'm doing better, my coping skills, all that stuff, but I don't know what my brain is going to be like. There are just like legitimate chemical stuff. And it's not just normal depression, it's, PTSD. So it's
wealthiest country on earth.
I really feel for her. And my daughter's 29, has a good job with health insurance, and still has trouble affording all the healthcare services that she needs. And the immorality of it, the inhumanity of it, is profound. And you cannot, you talk to folks from other countries, no one in the world can believe it. It is simply beyond belief what we put people in this country through in order to get healthcare, or when they can't get the healthcare they need. And it's a very basic principle. People get the healthcare they need and deserve. It's not universal coverage. It's not some incremental on the margins drug prescription plan proposal. It's guaranteed healthcare. And until we have that, we're going to have the kind of pandemic of COVID. We're going to have the mental health crisis, and we're going to have bankruptcies, and people will die. And why we allow the private market in healthcare to cause this level of human suffering is, I think, incomprehensible to moral people. And as long as it's an abstraction for many, there doesn't seem to be the momentum to change it. But if all it takes is one intense experience in this healthcare system, and you become a convert to Medicare for all.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Michael Lighty, as always. Very, this guy knows more about Medicare for all, the battle for it, and other healthcare matters than most. So thank you very much. We'll keep in touch.
Great, Jordan. Thank you. Great to see you.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.